Good evening and welcome. I'm Roy Blitzer and our show is Ask Dr. Business. The purpose of our time together is to provide information and insight and what I would call hints that will help make your work life and your professional career more satisfying. We are continuing our theories on jobs that require travel, and we're very fortunate this evening to have with us Chris Raanes, who's the CEO of ViewRay. And his claim to fame is for most of his career, he has had a job that has taken him on the road a long time. Welcome.
Thanks, Roy. Glad to be here.
I'd like you to please tell our audience a little bit about your professional background and the kinds of jobs that you had that required you to be on the road.
Well, as you said, right now I'm the CEO of ViewRay. We're a medical startup. We've got a next generation cancer treatment machine, and I'm on the road, CEO job 2/3 of the time.
Really? How many weeks out of the month would you say?
Most weeks out of the month I'm on the road. It's just that it's not every day of the week. And maybe there's a week in a month where I don't go. And I travel for everything. I travel for sales. I travel for meetings. As part of a young company, I travel for fundraising. I travel to meet with investors and give presentations at various shows. I'm literally on the road, like I said, four weeks a month, but not all the time. And before that, I was the chief operating officer at another medical device company.
And how much were you on the road then?
Probably just about the same.
Wow. And before that, I guess I want to know if this is a...
This is a trend.
Okay.
This is a trend. I've been this way from the beginning. Even my first job out of college, I was with United Technologies. We were working, it was back in the 80s, so we were working, of course, on Star Wars. And all those types of experiments were elsewhere, right?
Tell us a little bit about your background so people will understand how you got to be a CEO, even without the travel.
Without the travel. Well, way back, I'm a technical guy. So I studied analog engineering. I'm an MIT nerd. And I did that for just a very short amount of time. Like I said, I started in the 80s doing Star Wars kind of stuff, and we needed very fast cameras to measure the twinkles in stars.
And where did you travel then?
Out to various places to test these things, out to observatories. Wow. We had observatories in Hawaii. We had observatories out here in the West. I lived on the East Coast at the time. But I went quickly from this engineering thing into turning even that into a commercial business. So at the end of the day, the travel has been to sell things to people.
So the most of your travel time was customer facing?
Customer facing. And I'm a huge believer. I think that people do business with people, and that showing up is a huge part of the battle. You sitting across from somebody, you can get the point across, you can read the body language, you can read the emotions, and you turn that into the ability to figure out, is there a deal to be had here?
Well, I want to remind everybody about our fascinating guest. You're welcome to call with any questions. The phone number here is 650-856-1491. I'm here with CEO Chris Raanes, who is talking a little bit about his career as a traveling guy. He's been on the road a long time. Tell me a little bit, when you were first positioned these jobs, did they tell you all the travel, or did it come to you? I guess, did you know what you were getting into?
Not at the beginning.
Okay.
Right, not when I thought I was going to be an engineer or run programs and things like that. But it became obvious really quickly. When that, like I said, that morphed from a technical job into, hey, we can use this stuff for other applications. It turned into industrial applications, medical applications, and making those deals required going somewhere.
Now, this is with a professional sales force as well?
Sure.
Interesting. So you were the technical guy that went with them to explain it?
I would venture a guess. I mean, of course, the CEO job is different for everybody.
Yes.
I would venture a guess that most CEOs are their company's number one
Really?
sales guy.
The fantasy is that when you're the CEO, you have to stay around to manage the store. Not really.
You have to do everything, but I would say the thing you do, you represent the company better than anyone. You can sit down and make a deal, and you've got to have great people minding the store.
So
while
should
you're
we
on the road.
assume that you've never had a job where you didn't have to travel?
I think that's right.
Whoa, you're
I
my
think that's
perfect
right.
guest. Talk a little bit about some of the takeaways from these travel jobs. What have you learned through the years? Has it changed? You mentioned the 80s. We're now, maybe 30 years later.
Yeah.
What's the difference besides, I think, some of the travel hassle that we experience going on vacations and stuff like that?
Travel has changed a lot in the time since the 80s, and it's not for the better.
Okay.
I mean, we all know it. We all hate to get on the airplane. The seats are smaller. You get less food. It's not only smaller as in narrower, it's the guy in front of you is much closer than used to be.
He's almost on top of your meal now.
The upgrades for most people are gone, right? Because it's all filled with people like me in the front who have a million miles with the airline. And
I bet when your name comes up, they pop up and flash.
Well, I'll tell you, it's not often I don't get the upgrade. And that's part of it. I mean, if I were giving people advice and they say, so what's the trick to doing this right? Number one, pick an airline and stick with it. It does matter. Everything I'm saying is, when you get to the extreme, if you're only going to travel a few times a year, it doesn't matter. Pick the airline that has the nonstop flight or whatever. But if you're going to travel all the time, pick somebody and be loyal to them, because at the end, it works. They're loyal back to you, and you do get the better seats. You do get to stand in the short line. You do get help when things go wrong, and that's probably the biggest.
That's a great suggestion. And what kind of help would you need?
Well, these days especially, we all know what it's like to be somewhere. We're about to go, and the loudspeaker says, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have bad news." Right? The flight attendants are sick, or the pilots didn't show up, or the plane isn't here.
Or the crew has been working too long.
Working too long, and unfortunately this flight's been canceled, and we'd like you to go see customer service to get you rebooked on the next flight. And by the time
they must come to you.
Well, by the time you get there, you're 250th in line. But if you're at the top of the elite travelers of an airline, in other words, you've really invested in United, you've hit their 1K or global services, that's exactly what happens. You'll hear your name paged, and while there's 200 people over here at the counter, there's somebody over here that waves you over and says, "Let's figure this out."
Rank does have its privilege.
It does, but I think that's when it matters most, is when things go wrong, you can get some help. Aside from that, boy, you get the same wonderful food and the same small seats.
Well, when we were prepping for our time together, I was fascinated to hear one of your typical days. Why don't you tell our audience that time when you took the Sunday flight? And I think they would be fascinated to hear that.
Well, first let me say that I've got a family, and
we're going to get to that.
But it's an important point that while I travel all the time, as I said, I'm not gone the whole week. I do what I call surgical strikes. If I have to be somewhere, I get there, I do what I'm going to do, I move to the next, I do what I'm going to do. I might end up going to, let me pick last week.
Please.
Monday morning, I left for China. I did a Tuesday night dinner in China, a Wednesday morning meeting in China. By Wednesday night, I was in Korea for a dinner. I had a Thursday morning meeting in Korea, and there's a 6 p.m. flight back out of Korea to California. I was in California by 11 a.m. on Thursday.
And went to work on Friday?
4 customer meetings in 2 Asian countries, left Monday morning, back Thursday morning.
Well, one of the things that I want my audience to hear is you are boundless energy. That requires more stamina than the normal, sit in an airplane to New York for 6 hours can handle.
Maybe, but maybe it's that I get to sleep for 12 hours at a time when I'm on the airplane, that most people are busy working.
Let me feel like the Shoppers Network and see if I can get some callers in here to deal with the wonderful input we're getting. The number here is 650-856-1491. I'm here with Chris Raanes, who is the CEO of ViewRay, and giving a new insight to our topic of jobs that require travel. Talk a little bit about the whole concept of your family. If we had your kids here and we said, what's it like when dad is gone all the time, what would they say?
Well, they're used to it. So,
Okay, that's a good
right,
point.
they wouldn't say it's an unusual or wow, it's different when dad's usually gone. Dad is home probably 50 out of 52 weekends a year.
Wow.
That's a rule that I make, and it's a rule that I work with all my folks at the office as well. And it's not unusual, and I would be happy to pay for and recommend to any employee, you're in Asia on Friday and you want to come home for the weekend, catch that 6 p.m. flight on Friday night. It lands here by noon on Friday. You got Friday afternoon with your family, Saturday, Sunday, get back on the midnight flight on Sunday, and you'll be back in Asia Tuesday morning. So you miss Monday as a result, but you got to be home for the weekend. I think you got to just put a stake in the ground like that so that you know that you're home, and the family can count on
So
you being
weekends
there.
must be very important. I'm sure you don't get in a private airplane and go anywhere.
No, I think weekends for us are normal. I don't think they're special because dad's home. It's just we have weekends, and dad is there. But I've been very, very careful about that, and I would encourage anybody who takes a career with a lot of travel.
Good for you.
Set
Now
some rules.
talk a little bit, if you would, about how you handle jet lag, energy, scheduling meetings right after you arrive. I'm fascinated, since I just came back from a 17-hour trip from a vacation to,
Yeah.
to India, but it was grueling. It was very tiring.
I think you do get used to it.
Okay, that's probably true.
I think jet lag just becomes part of your life, and you don't worry about it. Again, I'm talking about an.
Do you change your clock? You watch?
I don't. I always leave my watch on home time.
Interesting. I
Yeah.
have to tell that to my wife, who's constantly telling me
Now, that's
that.
changed with this Apple Watch. It won't let me. It automatically figures out.
Changes where you're going to be. Okay.
But my standard dress watch, I always leave on California time. So one, I'm just used to it, right? So it doesn't bother me. Two, I am determined to get in and get out. And so that means when you land, there's a meeting within a few hours. You make it happen. You were talking about a schedule we were reviewing. I think it's the week after next.
Right.
Got to give a presentation in Boston on Monday, so I leave on the last flight on Sunday. Unusual, but this time I had to do it on a Sunday. Get into the East Coast around 1 in the morning. Couple meetings, presentation, nighttime flight over to Europe. Make one connection straight off the flight though into a series of meetings. That gets you home. It gets you home a couple days earlier. If you wanted to get there and spend the afternoon and catch up and all that, you're not home on Thursday or Friday.
Talk a little bit about exercise. One of the questions that came from our last show was, how do you stay in shape? What do you do?
I think the viewers can see maybe I don't. but in general, my rule is to stick to the schedule you stick to at home. And I'm a runner. So I've always gotten, and by the way, running is a great travel exercise because all I need is a pair of shoes,
That
and
is
a pair
true.
of shorts, and that fits in your suitcase just fine. It's not unusual that I'll get off the plane in Tokyo and go for a 5-mile run before dinner that
And
night.
I'm sure you stay at hotels that are safe enough to run around.
Of course, that's
course.
an issue, but yeah, and I like it. Part of the secret, part of why I'm kind of enthusiastic about it, even though I've been doing this for, as you point out now, since the 80s. I like it. I like going to
If
see
you like it,
things
then I'm
and
thrilled. We promote job satisfaction, and
go for a run in Tokyo. You get to see streets that you'd have never seen
that's
before.
true. Amazing.
Sometimes it means you can't find your way back because you can't read. You think you could pattern recognize those kanji characters, but you can't.
Well, let me solicit for a phone call here. 856-1491, area code 650. We're here with Chris Raanes, who is fascinatingly entertaining, chatting about his life on the road. As a CEO of ViewRay, he is basically almost gone every week.
Almost every week.
Talk a little bit about local foods, trying to see something that may not be about the business routine. Do you ever get any downtime to have? I know the whole thing is fun, but what about fun?
So it's interesting. I occasionally will do that. I'll stay an extra day because I really wanted to go see something. I got a trip into Hiroshima not that long ago. I've always wanted to see it. But usually, again, because of how much I'm on the road, I'm more about turning around and getting home. Getting back to the family, because my kids are about to leave home. They're just at that age. I want them to remember me, not say I was home once in a while.
One of the questions that came up previously was the concept of vacations. One of our guests had traveled so much that they didn't want to get on an airplane again. It sounds like you do make up for being away by taking your families on nice holidays and spending couple time that way, etc.
Yeah, we're heading off to the UK, in fact, in a couple weeks here. So it doesn't bother me. I'm pretty happy to go travel. And you brought up something before that I think is important. I love enjoying the local foods, and I love sharing that with my family. So go try some new Japanese.
You're an adventurous guy. Now, do you get your contacts to take you to local restaurants?
Oh,
how can
absolutely.
Okay.
No, they do that. It's a matter of pride in most places, and I actually believe it's a little bit of a matter of sport in some places, where it's a little bit of a test. They know that the local cuisine is something that you're not used to,
right?
And they kind of want to see how you're going to react, and it's almost a little bit of a challenge. But the good news is, for the most part, you go to places. I mean, let's pick Japan, right?
Right.
Japanese food is different from what we're used to here in California. There's a lot of raw foods. There are
a lot of eyeballs and
some
stuff.
Fish that we're not used to eating and all that, and they've got different textures. But you know that it's safe, right?
That
it's
is very
all
true.
just a matter of, you want to try it. And I have one other rule, and I do enforce this when I travel with some of my colleagues. Please don't ask what it is. Taste it. If you like it, have more. If you don't like it, don't have more. But if someone tells you what it is, sometimes that makes it just a little harder.
A little bit too hard
Yeah.
to. Well, it's interesting. We didn't talk about this in prepping, but as a CEO, I'm sure you get a different treatment than if one of your middle managers went. I'm sure they want to show you the best possible time you can. You get to probably see the best part of the cities and the countries you go to. And I think that is maybe why you like it so much, because you get to see the real part from a different perspective.
I think there's a lot to that. I do get taken care of really well when I show up. And it's partially because I'm the CEO, but it's also partially that I'm from a company that has a product that these folks really want, and they want us to be part of.
And you're adventurous as a style, right? You like it. You have fun.
But here's the other part. Just remember, and again, for tips and tricks for people, that's true for me once I'm on the ground. I'm treated really, really well by the customer, because they always want to be nice to the CEO. When I'm at the airport, when I'm in line at TSA, I get treated just like everyone else. When I'm trying to get that seat on the airplane, I get treated just like everyone else. And you got to keep that in mind.
That's true.
Going in there and demanding something only gets you the extra search, or the anger of the lady behind the counter or the guy behind the counter.
Tell everybody what you've done to get out fast. What systems have you set into place that get you out of the airport faster than most of us?
And again, it's about getting home, right? Because every week,
I like that.
Every week I get off that airplane and I'm trying to get home as fast as I can. So pick a seat near the door, pick it on the left side of the airplane. And the main reason is not that you need to get off the airplane first, but you don't want to be behind 50 other people, because then you get to the line and there's 50 people ahead of you in customs that you've got to wait behind.
That is true.
There are also some things you can just spend some money to buy convenience, and they are so worth it. Fill out the form, take the time, go get TSA Pre, go get Global Entry. Global Entry lets you bypass the whole passport line. You take your passport, you put it into a kiosk, you put your fingerprints down, it recognizes you, it gives you a piece of paper, you wave it at the customs guy, and you are out.
Unless you go to Abu Dhabi, which has the same process. You put your passport in, you declare your customs, and you don't do anything when you get to San Francisco.
Well,
they're getting that way, I think, many places. Let's hope.
Many places are, but if you do these pre-clear things, you can reliably be fast. And on the way in, it's TSA Pre.
Right.
And you can spend some money. I don't know how much it is, $200, $250 a year for something called Clear. You don't even have to take an ID out of your pocket. I feel like a commercial for these guys.
No, that's good. That's why
But you walk over to the station, you scan your boarding pass, you put your fingers down, a picture of you comes up, the agent compares the picture to that, that's your picture ID, and then they escort you to the front of the line.
And you're home faster.
No, in this case, I'm on the way out faster, which
that's
meant I can get to the airport a half hour later. I don't have to be there 2 hours ahead of time. I'm never there 2 hours ahead of time. So when you're doing the extreme amount, the tricks matter.
Talk about the satchel and the suitcase.
The satchel and the suitcase. So number one rule, never, ever, ever check baggage.
I think that's correct. Do you roll your clothes when you pack, or do you flat?
It depends. Some things roll, some things flat. I'm more or less a flat guy, but it depends. So a normal trip, it's a rollaway, just like.
Right.
But depending where you're going, Hong Kong, for example, is very, very strict about the size. So I've got the legal size because they check it, so I can get on anywhere. That works great. If you're going domestically and you're going to a smaller city where the connection is going to be
a great piece of advice.
In a regional jet, the rollerboard's not going to fit. So when I go from here to Cleveland and I'm not able to get the nonstop, I'm connecting through Denver or Chicago, that second leg's on a regional jet. Use a small bag without the rollerboard because that can get squished into the overhead.
Wonderful. Let me try one more time for our audience. Here we are. Wonderful, wonderful guest talking about all the things he's learned from being on the road. The phone number here is 650-856-1491. Chris Raanes is here passing on wonderful pieces of counsel. If you had to give someone advice, a young Turk wanting to make his or her mark in the world, what would you tell them if someone said you've got to travel 30-40% of the time?
Well, for me, I can't imagine wanting a job that had less than that.
Interesting.
I mean, my wife has even said that to me. You seem like you'd go crazy if you're just
being around
stuck.
too much. Right?
Yeah, I like it. So for me, that would be a fantastic draw. I don't know how you know that early on, so I would say try it. Get yourself.
Now that actually is give yourself a chance to try it.
Give yourself a chance to get out there.
It is hard with relationships, though. We talked about what it's like to not have total access to the person in person.
It is. There are a couple of adages, right? One, you gotta
work on it.
You gotta be upfront about it, and don't get yourself into a relationship and then suddenly change your travel plans. That's a
no,
bad
I
shot.
agree.
A lot of people will tell you, Roy, that your time, how long have you been married? The clock is only running when you're home. So to some degree,
that's true.
when you're away, even 20 years into a marriage, you could be kind of fresh still. You're working on your seventh year or something like that.
That's a good point.
I think that's true to a point. I think you go over a certain point and you disconnect too much, and that doesn't work. So you gotta find your own boundaries, know your partner's boundaries, and make sure you're really sensitive to that. The other thing I would say, communicate. Call often, send emails, send texts.
That's actually. Do you bring back gifts?
Keep in touch.
Well, I used to bring back gifts when I was young.
Well, I used to also when it used to matter, right? I mean, it used to go and you could get something regional that you just couldn't get.
And now we have Cost Plus and Pier 1,
they're
right?
all the same everywhere. You go to a mall anywhere in Europe and it looks exactly like Stanford
That's
Mall.
a very
it's
good
got
point.
the same stores, it's got the same products. Even the Swiss chocolate you bring back from the trips to Zurich, you can pick them up here in downtown Palo Alto.
And Trader Joe's even.
Trader Joe's. So yes, but not like I used to.
Okay, that's a good piece of. Talk a little bit, if you would, about how you spend your time on the plane. If you've got a 16-hour flight and you're sort of a high-energy guy, that can't be an easy experience either.
And I don't know if it's a learned behavior or I fall asleep.
Oh, you can sleep on an airplane.
I can fall asleep before we're even out of the gate.
That is a wonderful gift.
It is.
Do you take Ambien or any of those?
I don't touch any of that.
No enhancements?
No, don't touch any of that stuff. But for me, it is easy to sleep. And you asked me about energy before. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe it's not I'm an energetic guy. It's that I get to sleep for 13 hours straight on the way to Hong Kong, and I get off the plane. I've had more sleep than most people get in a normal night.
Well, we have about 2.5 minutes left, and I'm determined to get someone to call. The number here is 650-856-1491. And I'm here with Chris Raanes. Our show is Jobs That Require Travel, and this has been one of our most exciting experiences in terms of the insight we've gained. So if you wanted to talk a little bit about the negatives, we've been very cheery. And what would the negatives of this be, if there are any? They may not be negatives for you, but let's take a bigger picture.
Well, look, it's a huge time sink.
That's true.
Right? And it's an annoying, you've got to go in with the right attitude because the canceled flight is going to happen. And even if you're lucky enough, like me, to
You can't be too uptight.
be in the global service so that it's easy to get taken care of and fixed, you know, the best they can do is put you on the next flight, which is 3 hours from now. Now what are you going to do, right?
That's exactly true.
You can either get all bent out of shape about it, but there's not time to go home. Because by the time you get back home, then you're going to back through security a second. So you just got to go with the flow.
Well, I agree. You go with the flow. And I think you also know that if you are by a personality type, sort of an anxious type, you know, it's frustrating if you have an appointment at 8 o'clock in the morning and you're not going to make it.
Well,
and you have one right afterwards.
That's the thing.
That
I was going to get
crazy.
If there's one thing that still just eats away, it's if I know I need to be, whether it is home for an important dinner, home for a school night, in Erlangen for a meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'm sitting on an airplane, it's not going anywhere. The pilot said, you know, we've got a ground halt. There's just nothing you can do. Then you sit in your seat and you start vibrating. But there's nothing you can do.
Now, do you work with, do you do all these reservations yourself, or do you work with the travel agent? For example, one of the things that we've learned is that if we fly to New York and we have a Broadway show on a Friday night, I don't do that anymore. Too high a risk.
Too high a risk.
And that's because I did it myself. I think if I had someone else helping in that, maybe it would not be as dramatic.
I am really lucky, and here's where you can leverage when you're the CEO and you can get a world-class assistant, and I've got somebody who takes care of that stuff, worries about it more than I do. Until, you know, the last 2 executive jobs I've had where I've had that kind of assistant, I did it all myself.
Wow, good for
all
you.
Myself, yeah.
Well, we have about 1.5 minutes left. I will get one more pursuit in for a call. 650-856-1491. But as we wind down our show, I want you to think for a moment if you would do anything different. We have 30 seconds. If you do anything different in your travel career, what would it be?
Oh, boy. Well, I would do it again. So let's just start with that. I like it. I like being out there. I like sitting across from people. You know, it's great that you're in Palo Alto, but if you were in New York, I'd have flown to New York to do this.
Oh, that would be great.
It's the kind of thing. I'd have learned early on, don't be so picky about your airline. People will tell you, it's this airline or that. Pick the airline that has the nonstop flights, right?
That is great counsel.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, young fella, we're out of time.
I can't believe it.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
want to let everyone know we're back on March 16th. Another guest from Google will talk about his life on the road. Thank you again. I want to thank my crew. Good evening, and that's the end of our show.
All right. Thanks, Roy.